Today is Thursday, April 18th, 2024. I'm interviewing Robert Koperwas. My name is Sherry Aviv. We're doing this interview in Atlanta, Georgia, in the United States. Great. Today is Thursday, April 18th, 2024. This is Robert Koperwas. My name is Sherry Aviv, interviewing Robert in Atlanta, Georgia, in the United States. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Why don't you tell us your name and then spell it for us?
Bob Koperwas, B-O-B-K-O-P-E-R-W-A-S.
And what was your name at birth?
I believe it was Ignash, but I've had many names since then.
So let's start with Ignace. Can you spell that for us?
I have no idea because I never used it.
Okay. So what other names are you known by? After Ignace, what was your next name?
Isidore. And then I changed it, I believe, when I was roughly 9, maybe 8, to Robert. And then I go by Bob.
So how did you get the name Isidore? Who gave that to you?
I believe our friends at Ellis Island that had no idea how to pronounce Ignash, so they made me Isidore.
And then what motivated you to change it to Robert?
Because Isidore was not a common name and lots of people laughed when they heard that name. So I decided to change it, and I had two choices, or I made two choices. It either was going to be Robert or Alan. I chose Robert, and today, neither Alan or Robert is a popular name.
So when you changed it to Robert, was that part of another process? Was it legally changed?
It was legally changed, and that's what it is on my citizen papers and my passport, and as far as the government is concerned.
So did you change it when you became naturalized?
I believe so. I don't think I have my naturalization papers, but I believe they were Robert.
So a very American name after a very European name like Ignace.
Well, yes, Ignash is supposedly a Polish name, and I've never heard of it since then.
So why don't we talk about how old you are today?
I am 80, and we came to the United States on Christmas Day, 1947, when I was a month shy of being 4.
Okay, so you're 80 today, you'll be 81
in January next year.
Next year. And your birth date, which has an interesting story, what day were you born, or what day do you use as your birth date?
I use January 14th as my birthday, but like you mentioned, it is probably, I shouldn't say probably, it is definitely not my birthday. What I was told by my father is I was born in Russia sometime in the winter. Well, Russia, which I think he meant Ukraine, the winters are, just guessing, from September to April, May. So I don't know what year I was born, what month I was born, or what day I was born.
But you do know it was in 1944? Was that
No,
the year?
it could have been, if it was earlier than January, it would have been 43.
I see. And how does it make you feel when you're not sure this is your exact birthday? Do you celebrate this day? Do you think about it?
No, I don't think about it. I celebrate it, and I really didn't think about it till my parents passed away, and till I retired, and then had plenty of times to think. And then I thought, you know what, that really can't be my birthday. I think it's a day that they picked because when they were running, they didn't have a calendar. They had no idea what day it was, and they just picked a day. Matter of fact, I didn't know, they never celebrated a wedding anniversary. And then I think when I was in my late 20s, they decided that April was their anniversary. So I don't even think they got married.
Mm-hmm. Do you think this January date meant anything to them, or it was just a random
The
pick?
only thing I could think of, they had to pick a date, and I had a cousin that was 2 years younger than me, and she was born on January 13th. So they said, okay, we'll make it one day later.
Yeah, okay. So when you were growing up, even though this date was unsure, did they still celebrate your birthday on that day?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
They
Okay.
celebrated, and right now, that's the only date I know, so I celebrated on it, on the same date.
Right. So as a child, still, I know you mentioned Ellis Island, you're not here yet. What was your first language, or what languages did you understand as a child, whether here or there, do you know?
Good question, and I say good question. My father spoke a few languages. My mother spoke Polish, did not speak Yiddish. My father did. When I heard a language, I didn't know if it was Polish or Yiddish. I knew it was a foreign language. Mm-hmm. And I believe that when I was born, what my father said is that my mother was very, very ill when I was born. And my guess, I'm just speculating, is that I had some damage, and it was to my right brain, where my language skills are terrible.
Right. So with your parents hiding in Russia or Ukraine, did either of them speak any Russian? Do you know that?
No, my mother would definitely not.
Mm-hmm.
My father, if he heard 3 or 4 words, he'd be able to start a conversation. So my father might have been able to communicate in almost any language.
Yeah. So you're talking about your parents and that they ran. Let's talk about your father for a minute, and then we'll talk
Okay.
about your mother. What was your father's birth name?
Yittel. And he was from Krakow.
And did he have another name besides Yidel? Was that his Hebrew name?
That was
Yiddish?
his Hebrew name.
And what was his regular name? What did he go by?
Well, when I knew of a name, his friends, which also were survivors, called him Yittel. Mm-hmm. He went by the name Julius, which was the Americanized name probably at Ellis Island also.
Mm-hmm. And what kind of home life, what kind of environment did your father grow up in? How many siblings did he have?
I believe my father had 8 brothers and sisters. 3 besides him survived. And we all lived very close to each other. in Brooklyn, New York.
And did your father grow up in a religious household? What kind of household did he grow up in?
He grew up in I believe, an Orthodox household, and we were very religious. I'd say for at least the first dozen or more years.
In the United States?
In the United States. Well, yes, I don't remember anything before. And when we had Jewish holidays, my grandfather, who survived on my mother's side, would try to hold services. My father would help out, and we'd probably start eating our meal about 2 a.m.
So here your father comes from a religious household. You said 3 of your uncles survived the war.
That's correct.
Right. What did your father do for a profession in, where was he born?
I believe in Krakow.
Okay. And what did he do for a living?
I don't know, because he was, when the war started, he was 17 and a half. My mother, who did not know or did not live in the same place as my father, was going to be 17 in 10 days. So they, my guess was, either went to school or they weren't very wealthy. My father worked, because he mentioned something of being working in some type of factory, and the boss liked him a lot, and he said that he was going to give the business to him when he got older. But that was what was.
Do you know what your grandfather did, your father's father?
No, I don't.
So, did your father ever tell you what prompted him to leave where he lived in Krakow and go to Ukraine, Russia? Did he ever talk about that?
Yes, not really. What I venture is my father was very, very outspoken, and he believed that he would say the wrong word to somebody and be shot. So as soon as the war started, I believe, he went on the run.
It saved his life?
Most likely.
And what about in terms of the family and your uncles? Did you ever hear, did they stay with your grandparents? What, do you know what happened to them?
No, they all went to camps. They obviously survived. And after the war, they found each other.
So what's the birth order? Where's your father in the birth order? Is he the oldest son, the youngest? Where is he in that?
He is, of the survivors, he was the third one. My Uncle Henry was the youngest, then my father, then my Uncle Harry, and then the oldest survivor was Uncle Joe.
And how did it feel to have that family that survived the war? Did you realize what they went through as a young child?
Not at all. Matter of fact, the first time that I knew what they went through, matter of fact, to go back a step, when I first came to the United States, I don't remember how old I was, either 5 or 6, I got beat up because I was a Nazi. So I went to my parents and said, "Why are we Nazis?"
Who said that to you? Was it a school child?
You know, see, some kids on the block.
And what did your parents say when you
We're,
asked them?
we're not Nazis. We ran away from Nazis, and I didn't push it. But the first time that I knew what happened was when I was much older, and both my brothers were older, and we started watching on U.S. television a series called The Holocaust. And all three of us just had our mouths wide open. And afterwards, we looked at my father and said, "That happened to you?" And then he started talking about it a little, but really never got into detail.
Do you know what he shared with you?
I'm sorry?
Do you know what he shared with you at that time?
No, because it wasn't anything really relevant.
So your father ran away. You mentioned your uncles were in camps. Did any of them have tattoos that you
All
saw?
of them, yes. They were all had stamps.
What
numbers.
did that mean to you when you saw those stamps on their arm? When you learned
They
more?
usually didn't see stamps on their arm. They would wear long sleeve shirts. You know, later on, you know, I would see them, and I knew at that time what it was.
So as you get older, you learn more about the experience of your father and his brothers. Did your father ever talk about it with you, or the importance of remembering what happened? Did he ever?
Not at all. I think with him, it's a part of my life I don't want to remember.
Besides on your father's side, your uncles, who didn't make it, who were killed or rounded up that you know of your family tree on your father's side?
Well, the other brothers and sisters, their parents, I assume their grandparents were alive at that time, so they must have perished. The Koperwas name, if you look in a telephone directory, is not a very, very common name. What I did later on is I did some research, and I found really hundreds of Koperwases in Poland. So I contacted a few of them and exchanged emails with one of them, and he said that the Koperwas name was Jewish. His Koperwas name was Jewish. During the Inquisition, they changed it to another name, or they changed religions. And his guess is all the Koperwases that you see, going back a few hundred years, were Jewish, but then they became another religion.
Interesting. Was he a family member that you connected, like a cousin through a cousin that you got a connection to?
No, I just found names, and this person had an email address, so I contacted him. He was about, say, almost 20 years younger than me, and I remember he was an engineer in Poland, and we probably exchanged emails for 6-9 months.
So let's talk a little bit about, do you know about your mother's family?
Not much.
So how many siblings? What was her name, her maiden name, your mother?
Wohlrauch.
Could you spell her first name and all her different first names and her last name?
What I knew was Basha, which I believe is Basha. She went by Bertha. She went by Barbara. She went by Bosch. And her last name was Walrauch.
Can you spell that?
Walrauch.
And how many siblings did she have?
She had two sisters, Hela and Allah. And Abraham and Bertha were their parents.
Her parents, your grandparents.
No, her parents.
Right, your
my
grandparents. So you have Abraham and Bertha and Allah and Hela. And your mother and her husband and you. On your mother's side, did they survive the war? Her siblings?
Yeah, I know. That's why I knew them. Yes, they survived. Allah lived in New York. Hela lived in Chicago. And I really had not much to do with that side of the family, right. Nor did my brothers have much to do.
Where were they hiding? How did they survive Europe? Her family.
Idea.
When your family came to the U.S., did any of them, the grandparents or the siblings, come with your mother to the U.S., or did they go their own way?
I believe we were the only ones to come over at that time, but, and this is an assumption, that everybody else came in within a year or two.
Okay. So your mother was young too? She probably was in school or?
Right, she was not even 17 yet when the war started.
Do you know what her father did as a profession in Europe?
I have no idea.
What kind of religious household were they? Were they Orthodox?
They were very Orthodox.
So here you are, you're born in, let's assume for now, 1944. Do you know from your parents, you were young, where you were from the time you were born until the war was over, where you lived?
No, I just had to speculate from conversations that they had with their friends.
In hiding?
No, their friends in the United States, when they started talking about some of the things that happened in the war.
Right. Do you know if your parents were in hiding somewhere or somebody's
They had
to be?
No, I think they were, quote unquote, in the field, just running from one place to the other.
Right.
Because what I understand is if you were hiding someplace, you couldn't trust the person that was...
Right. So the war ends and you're about
a year and a half.
Year and a half. Do you know where your parents went afterwards with you until you came to the United States?
I believe they were in Krakow. And I believe that my uncles also were in Krakow. And the first person to come to the United States was my Uncle Henry.
So let's talk about you coming to the United States with your family. Can you tell us again how you came to the United States, plane, ship, date again? Would you mind sharing that?
Sure. I came by ship. It was called the Tiger Marine, and the only reason I know it is because I looked it up. I was almost 4, and I would assume that coming over by ship, seeing the Statue of Liberty, everybody was yelling, screaming. I don't remember a darn thing. I don't really remember anything in the United States till I was in the 3rd grade.
How did you get to the United States? Did your brother Henry who was here sponsor you, or did an organization sponsor you?
I think it was an organization called HIAS.
So when you came here, you said you went through Ellis Island. They changed your name. to Isidore.
Right, yeah, from Ignatius to Isidore.
And then where did you go? Where did Hyas or whomever send you to live when you first got here?
Well, what I think my father said is they gave him $100 and they said, that's yours. Now find an apartment, find a job, find some food. And my father was very ambitious. I probably did not see my father till I was maybe 9 or 10 years old. He would go to work before I got up, and he wouldn't come home till after I went to sleep.
So you arrive in New York, Ellis Island. You live somewhere, whether Bronx, Queens, or Brooklyn. Do you know which borough you were in at first before
We
you
did.
founded?
I remember it was Brooklyn, and we lived on something called, or a place called Osborne Street, which I don't remember anything at all about it.
Mm-hmm.
Then we moved to a place, or to something called Howard Avenue, which was a low middle class section of Brooklyn. And then my father was successful with some of his work and businesses, and we bought a home in what they call the East Flatbush area of New York. And that's where I grew up my older years. When I started working, that's where I worked from. When I got older, I moved to Manhattan and really never went back to Brooklyn.
So you're a young child, and you mentioned somebody calling you a name earlier. Did you have unusual clothes? Do you remember standing out? Did you want to be American?
No, the only thing I remember about clothes is my parents didn't have much money, and every other day I would come home with a hole in my pants because I was running and tripped or playing a game and something happened. But that's about it for clothes.
You mentioned brothers, so you get here. What happened soon after? How many brothers do you have?
I have 2 brothers.
And what was the next brother? What was his name?
His name was Sam, S-A-M.
And when was he born?
He was conceived in Europe and born 6 months after we got here, June 1948.
Do you remember this apartment you lived in? Was it 1 room, 2 rooms? Did you share a room with your brother? Who else lived in the apartment?
My Uncle Henry lived in the apartment, and I think I shared a room with him. My brother Sam was born in June 48. My Uncle Henry was married in December 1954, and my brother Sam stayed and lived in the crib till Henry made room for himself.
Mm-hmm. Did your Uncle Henry, what did he do for a living while you all lived together as a family?
Henry was ambitious, and he went in the garment business, and I don't know when, but pretty soon he started his own garment factory where my father worked for him till he went on and started his own business.
Mm-hmm. Just to relate back that your Uncle Henry lived with you, he was a survivor. Did he ever talk to you about his experience?
None of them ever talked to me.
Did they talk to each other about it? Did they speak Polish to each other?
Well, I understood I think I understood. I understood something Polish, something Yiddish,
Right.
not fluent, but I understood a little of it. But I don't remember them talking about it. They probably did that in private.
So, the household you grew up in, with both your parents coming from Orthodox families, what was Jewish holidays like? Were they, you said, religious for a couple of years? Did you have Shabbat meals?
Oh, yes.
And do you remember them? What do you remember about them? Were there favorite dishes your mother made from the old country, or?
No, the only thing that I remember, and they still make it today, is potato latkes.
So, you're a young child coming here. How did you learn English?
I assume in school, because I wouldn't have learned it from my parents. And I had some friends, so I had to speak to them. And I don't think any of the friends were Holocaust survivors. They were either, at least second generation Americans, and some of them could have been older. It wasn't a question I would ask.
So you were born in Europe at a terrible time. Do you feel European in a sense, or do you feel American, or it's part of you in your entirety?
No, I feel American because I really have no remembrance at all about Europe.
So when your parents ran, and then eventually, you said, went to Krakow, did they bring anything from Europe of the old country that then they could pass on to their children? Did they bring anything?
Yes, my mother had this ballerina statue that she brought that broke a few times. And I remember for me, they had a Tissot watch that I never used.
Do you still have?
No.
Did you have any favorite childhood toy that you brought with you, or a stuffed animal that
From Europe?
from when you came over on the boat, to in terms of that? Did your parents pass anything on to you from their parents, since your mother's parents came here
No.
from the country? Were they able to get money out to come here, or they just highest helped them?
I think highest helped them.
Okay. Did your parents belong to a synagogue, or did they, or anything, a temple, when they came here to be part of a Jewish community?
They did.
Do you remember being part of that?
No.
Did you go to religious school here?
I did. I went to Hebrew school with the thought of my parents of me to be a rabbi. That lasted about 2 or 3 weeks.
Okay. And, during the war, just staying at a high level, the covenant of being circumcised, did that ever happen for you after the war?
I was circumcised in the United States. I don't know exactly when, but I remember it was very, very painful.
Right. So your brother Sam was born 6 months later. Do you think that maybe they did, occurred to me, both around the same time? Was he circumcised?
No, I don't. He was circumcised, whatever, 8 days later or so, yes.
Okay. Let's talk about, you say you have 2 brothers, so it's
Yes.
you and then Sam born jointly thereafter. You have a 3rd brother?
I have a 3rd brother, Eric, who is 10 and a half years younger than me. And Eric probably was born because of me. When I was 10 or 9 and a half, one of their friends had a little child. And I said, oh, I like this. Could we have something like that? Well, I don't think they really thought about it. And my mother was very disappointed because he was not a she.
Mm-hmm. Right. Do you remember going to public school the first time? Like, do you know where you...
I don't remember the first time. I do remember, I think the earliest memory I had was the 3rd grade. And what I do remember is that I was not a very good student.
Mm-hmm. So let's go back to what you mentioned earlier, that you think your mother was sick or maybe
Right.
malnutritioned, and that impacted you?
I believe I have a right brain problem because I'll just go on ahead. Later in life, I lived in Paris. I lived in Tokyo. I took a total immersion course for 3 months for France. I was lucky if I could count to 10.
So you have this, but you still became a lot of achievements in life. When you were in school, you mentioned earlier about being called out, being identified as something related to Nazis or whatever.
Well, no, that was much, much earlier.
Or much earlier. In school, did you experience, was it a public school?
Yes.
Did you, at a young age or in that era of the 50s, experience any anti-Semitism?
No, because the area that we grew up, we had 3 different type of people. We had Jews, we had Italians, and we had blacks. I didn't know what a WASP was till I went to college.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned earlier that all your uncles, your father, all lived within blocks of each other.
Yes.
Almost like a little
Matter of fact,
shtetl
not
from
only at blocks of each other. Our address was 673. My uncle Joe and Harry were 672, right across the street. And Henry lived with us. So yes, it's not within blocks of each other.
Mm-hmm. So like a little shtetl of your own that they needed to stay connected because they had lost each other so much. Yeah.
Could be.
Yeah. I'm just going to go back to one of your uncles, Harry. Okay. I think you shared he was in the military. How did that make the family feel for going through war and then going off to war? Do you remember him going off to war?
No, I don't, but he always said the biggest mistake I ever made was not staying in the Army.
So, because, you know...
He probably enjoyed it.
Was he sent back to Europe? Do you know?
I don't think he went to Europe. I'm not quite sure. He never really, or if he talked about it, it wasn't a big deal. But I think he was in Asia, and it was during the Korean War that he was drafted.
Yeah. So here your father, mother, uncles, did they ever go back and did they want to take you?
They never wanted to take me, and they didn't go back. The only, I shouldn't say that. My parents went back for my mother, who had varicose veins and bad feet, and there was supposedly a spa in Poland, so I think they went 2 or 3 years back to there, but that was a specific thing. They didn't then go to Krakow to see how things were, or Rodham. I'm sorry, and that's where I said Krakow. Rodham is where my father originally came from.
Were they angry and they never wanted to set foot in those
I don't know.
soils?
I have no idea.
You mentioned earlier that you'd been in Europe, so I'll page ahead a little bit. How did you end up in Europe? And did you do any research while you were there?
I ended up in Europe. I spent my professional career working for IBM, and they assigned me to Paris. And I couldn't do any research because I didn't speak French, I didn't speak German, and I'd been to Germany. So there was no research that I was able to do. The only research, which is almost the same, was being able to look things up here, or here being in the United States.
Did you go to Rodham or did you go to Krakow?
I'd never been to Poland.
Tell me what you used to do with phone books when you were abroad.
Whenever I went on a business trip, and I went on quite a few business trips, I would always look in a phone book to see if I found a Koperwas. And lo and behold, once I did find it, and I wrote the name down. I asked my father about it, said, "Oh, don't have anything to do with that."
So you grow up in this wonderful enclave of family from Europe. You and your brothers learn about the Holocaust. How did it make you feel knowing that your family members had gone through all of this? And in some ways you too, because of the malnutrition for your mother.
I didn't think of malnutrition at that time till later on.
But how did it make you feel as you grew to learn more about that period of time?
Well, I did not have a liking towards Germans. I have never owned a German car. And after traveling and being with Germans and talking to them, I have no problems at all with Germans. And I didn't buy a German car because I found other cars that I liked better.
Did you wonder what your family had to do to survive and how they did it?
All I knew is that it wasn't easy, and somehow they did survive, because otherwise I wouldn't be here.
Yeah. Did your parents and you together, or maybe separate, light Yortzeit candles for those that didn't survive in Europe?
Yes.
Did
There were a lot of candles lit.
Yeah. How do you remember getting naturalized in the United States when you were 9 to change the name? So you go to public school, and then when did you learn about the Holocaust in school?
Never learned about it in school.
Only from the TV show.
Right.
After you went to school, you went to college, and then you said you worked for IBM. Were you ever in the military?
I was drafted into the military during the Vietnam War.
And what did you do?
I was a finance clerk.
So with war in the family history, did your parents worry about you being in the service and where you could be sent? And
They did, because at that time, I had no idea how to shoot a rifle. And if I was sent to Vietnam, I would say my chances of survival would be very, very small.
Mm-hmm. How do you think your family history has shaped you and your Judaism or not? Do you consider yourself Jewish?
I was born Jewish. I'm not a practicing Jew.
Mm-hmm. How do you think it shaped who you are, your family, their history coming here?
Never thought of it.
Do you celebrate Jewish holidays?
Not anymore.
But your family kept Jewish traditions in the household?
They did.
Did you get bar mitzvah?
Yes, I did.
What was that like to carry on that life cycle event for the,
Well, for me, it was very stressful to be able to memorize this Hebrew that I never spoke.
Right. I know you shared with me that for your family coming here and the children, that Stewart is a common name. Why is Stewart a common name in your family tree?
I have no idea. Stewart is a cousin, Henry's one of his oldest child, and my youngest brother is Eric Stewart. So Stewart or something with an S probably rang a bell for them.
Do you think it was after any of the grandparents that didn't survive or family members?
I don't know because they never spoke about their parents.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't really speak about their siblings. The only one that they mentioned was the Selena, and I was able to find a picture of her, and that brought both of them to tears.
Mm-hmm. Do you need a break? So you've done some research. You reached out. You looked for names. What were you looking for when you were searching for all these Koperwas? What
to
drove
find
you to
out
do
if
that?
find out if they were related. Matter of fact, what I did find was a Koperwas in Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
Well, matter of fact, I shouldn't say that. A Koperwas that came from Michigan found me. I was in the hospital for a procedure, and a nurse came in and said that was my maiden name. And, where are you from? And she said, Michigan. And then part of my family moved to Arizona. And I remember my father or his brothers saying at one time, it was an uncle of mine, or it could have been a second uncle, just left Poland and went to the United States.
Mm-hmm.
So I assume that's where he went to.
But you must have been hungry for family, for connection, for history.
I was, yeah. But if, somebody said, I'm a Koperwas, I'm no longer a, Jewish, and I don't know anything about the history of things,
Mm-hmm.
how much more do you want me to pursue that?
So you have been married.
Yes.
What was your wife's name?
Selena.
And how did you tell her about who you were, where you were born? What was that like for you?
Same way as I'm speaking to you, just telling as much as I know, and that wasn't that important, where I was born, how I was born. It's who I am now. Mm-hmm. But we did, speak about occasionally about Holocaust and things that happened.
Is there anything else that you want to say about Selena? I know she's passed away recently, right?
Yes.
Okay. What made you decide that you wanted to do this interview today? What is it that you want to share as part of this interview?
I don't know. I was thinking about myself and saying, I'm probably unique. I have no idea when I was born, where I was born, what year I was born. Maybe, somebody down the line, next year, 50 years from now, 500 years from now, will take a look at it and say, that's interesting. That's something like that could have happened.
And it's always kind of been in the background of your family, whether you had direct experience seeing all your uncles and father and mother. All your family survived that you knew.
Well, yes, obviously the only ones that I know
Right.
are the ones that survived, but it was not the only ones. There was quite a few that didn't make it.
Did any of the family members make their way to Israel that you connected to that survived the war?
There was a cousin that I went to visit in Israel that survived. And later on, when I went to Germany, I met that factory manager that my father worked for. I went over to his house.
Amazing. What was that like?
A little strange because he didn't speak English, I didn't speak German, but his wife spoke a little broken English.
Did you talk about your father?
Not really.
He was going to give him the business.
No, it was more of an accommodation, I did get to see him. Here's this, give this to your father.
I asked this earlier, I'll ask it again, about how your experiences your family history has made you the person you are, or what you do. Are you involved in any community work or Jewish outreach because of your family history?
I don't.
Do you, if there's a Passover Seder, Rosh Hashanah, the potato latkes for Hanukkah, do you enjoy those holidays? And
I used to.
okay, any reason why not today?
Well, I just don't believe in any organized religion, but I know that I am born Jewish, and the few friends that I have in this retirement community are Jewish also.
So you shared you wanted to tell your story because you don't know what the future will need to research. What would you like to tell somebody who might be watching this video?
I really don't have anything to say. It's just that lives were turned upside down, and nobody today, if you ask people about the Holocaust, they take a look at that and say, oh, Vietnam War, World War II, World War I, the Civil War, I can't relate to that.
There's a lot going on in the world today, and a lot of trauma induced for people who have been through this. Any thoughts of the increased anti-Semitism in the world today?
No, the only thing that I could say is I'm glad I was born when I was born, because I don't want to be a young child today. And the anti-Semitism, I think, was going on all the time. It was just more covert than it is now.
Okay. I'll pause. Sorry. So we've talked a lot about your experiences, and you have two brothers, Sam and Eric. Do you know, have they done any family research that they've shared with you? Have they have this interest in finding out about your family history as well?
No, it's the exact opposite. I find something, I tell them about it, or I send it to them, but they really have not probed into that.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any cousins from your uncles, their children?
I really am not close to any of my cousins. My mother's side, lost contact with them, and two of them passed away. And on my father's side, really have no cousins that I'm in contact with.
So you mentioned you're in a retirement community, we won't share where, and they have a lot of Jewish activities. Do you like going to those activities? Does it make you feel part of a community here?
No, occasionally we'll go to the synagogue for a concert or a speaker, but never go there for actual services. But they do have Friday night services every Friday, and I go just a few times a year for dates with my wife.
Yeah. Passover's coming up. Any thoughts about what's going on in Passover and being in, in terms of that? Does that mean anything special to you?
Not anymore.
About freedom, Okay. You have this wonderful history family yourself surviving. Do you wonder what it took, and would you have had, you don't know the resolve you would have to have gone through what your parents went through with you to protect you and save you?
I could just assume what it must have been like. I was an infant, and infants don't walk around and say, oh, let me look at something. They probably cry all the time. Mm-hmm. So my guess is I had a hand over my mouth to protect us from being heard and probably killed.
Do you, I know you have often mentioned about not having a lot of children to be with at a young age. Do you want to expand upon that? Not having a lot of playmates at a young age, maybe in Europe?
In Europe, I don't know. Mm-hmm. I have no idea what there was in Europe. I was almost 4 when we left Europe, and I don't remember a darn thing. Mm-hmm. And I had plenty of American friends. A lot of them were Jewish friends in the United States.
So how did you, from all of your work and experience and career, and mainly in the Northeast, and then some in Europe, how did you end up in Atlanta, Georgia?
As I said, I worked for IBM, which stands for I've Been Moved. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what they did. I went from New York to Paris. And when I left New York, they had to drag me on a plane. I didn't want to leave. After being in Paris, it wasn't that I was that thrilled about Paris, because when I was there, it was very anti-Semitic.
What kind of experiences do you have in Paris that were triggered?
The nice experiences were just being able to see Paris, get exposed to a different food, different eating style. Here, I gulp down my dinner in 10 minutes. There, I used to eat dinner for 2.5 hours.
And then what type of anti-Semitism did you experience in Paris?
I had a girlfriend who had a previous boyfriend named Jean-Luc. I remember that name. And she said, if Jean-Luc knew that I was with you, he'd kill us both. He hated Jews.
Were you sensitive to telling anybody while you lived in Paris that you were Jewish?
No, it was bad enough being American, because when I was in Paris, it was when de Gaulle was trying to unify Canada into France, and everything that was not French was not good.
Did you ever hide your Judaism? Whether
No.
you lived in different places in Germany, did you hide your Judaism?
No, the only time that I ever not hid my Judaism is when I was speaking to somebody and they would say, "You're not Jewish, are you?" And I'd say, "No." And then I'd let them blabber for a few minutes and they'd say, "By the way, I am Jewish."
What type of things did they feel then more comfortable sharing with you when you weren't Jewish? Were they?
Well, more of anti-Semitic type of things.
So here you are, you've been moved, and IBM moves you to Atlanta.
Yes and no. Coming back from Paris, where I said I wanted to go back to New York, when I came back from Paris, I said, I don't want to go back to New York, and I gave them a choice of, I believe, 4 different cities, which are all large cities, and they selected Atlanta. So I moved to Atlanta, then they moved me to Boca Raton, Florida, then they moved me to Tokyo, then they moved me back to Florida, and that's where I met my wife, and after say about 4 or 5 years, we both looked at each other and said, "What are we doing here? We don't like the sun. People are not very, very nice. Let's move somewhere." And we looked around in different cities and finally decided to come back to Atlanta.
So when you came to Atlanta, you created a community of friends. Did you engage with the Jewish community at all in Atlanta?
Not really, and my wife did. I participated in some things, but it was mostly on her doing.
And what type of things did you engage in the community? Was it programs at a synagogue or?
It was our house was across the street from a synagogue, so we didn't go there for services, but we went there for cited or
social events. How does it make you feel? Does it make you feel like you belong to something, or you just did it for your wife?
Did it more for my wife.
Okay. And now you've had a very international life, starting in Russia, Ukraine, Poland, and then in your professional career, now you're back in Atlanta.
Yeah, but I don't remember anything of my initial European life. But yes, I've traveled a lot, but not as much as people, much younger people today, who travel all the time. They go to school for a year overseas. They'll either go to graduate school overseas.
So you talked about having experienced some anti-Semitism. I'm going to go back to that. Since you've been in Atlanta, which is a modern city now in the South, but did you experience any anti-Semitism here that you were sensitive to, or not? That it was, I'm just curious.
Not directly, but indirectly. Nobody said anything, but once they found out that my wife and I were Jewish, all of a sudden the contact wasn't what it used to be.
Besides this conversation with your friends, have you ever felt the need to hide your Judaism?
No. I am what I am.
How do you, I know you said you're not involved in organized religion. How do you feel about Judaism culturally? About, you know, what it does as a culture or any of that?
I don't think about it.
Okay. Do you still identify, even though you don't believe in organized religion, as Jewish?
I'm sorry, do I still?
Even though you don't believe in organized religion, do you still consider yourself Jewish?
I was born Jewish, so what am I, you know?
Are you, okay. Anything else you want to add or share?
I don't think so. I appreciate your interviewing me.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much. What is this a picture of?
That's a picture of my mother and myself, and probably taken in Krakow after the war. And so my age is somewhere between 2 and 4.
What is this a picture of?
That's again my mother and myself, obviously sometime in the winter, and in Europe, also in Krakow, because that's where they went after the war, waiting to come to the United States.
What is this a picture of?
Of yours truly, me.
What were you doing there?
I was posing for straighten out a bow tie for my bar mitzvah.
What is this a picture of?
That's my parents and me, the little guy in the middle, at the same bar mitzvah.
What is this a picture of?
It's a picture of my father and my mother, myself, my middle brother, Sam, and my youngest brother, Eric, who was a little baby, probably back at home.
What is this a picture of?
My mother's parents, which were the only surviving grandparents for me, Abraham and Bertha, and that's me.
Perfect. What is this a picture of?
That's me running the Peachtree Road Race in Atlanta.
What year?
Probably in the late 70s. That's 1970s.